February 14, 1945. Lechfeld Air Base, Bavaria, Germany. Oberst Heinrich Baer set down his morning intelligence report and reached for his coffee. His iron cross gleamed against his Luftwaffe blue uniform. "Look at this," Baer said, sliding the document across the briefing table with one finger. "The Americans think their escort fighters can catch the 262. Major Walther Dahl, Jeschweiter Commodore of JG 300, leaned forward and laughed. "Mustangs pursuing jets, they might as well send bicycles after our automobiles." Hauptmann Joseph Priller, Chief of Luftwaffe Intelligence Analysis, shifted uncomfortably in his chair and cleared his throat. "The reports indicate they are achieving interception success during takeoff and landing phases, Herr Oberst." But Baer waved him off. "Priller, we achieved a 50-to-1 kill ratio at Chmur last month. 47 American bombers destroyed for the loss of a single 262. He tapped the report. "At Rain, 35 bombers down, 0 losses. At Brandenburg, 41 destroyed, 2 262s damaged, both returned to base." The mathematics were undeniable. German jets were invincible in the air. What Baer didn't know, what none of them could have known as they reviewed intelligence summaries in that overheated briefing room, was that American tactical doctrine would destroy 237 Me-262s in the following 90 days. The numbers would become catastrophic. For every 10 262s that became operational, 7 would be destroyed before completing 5 combat missions. 1,433 Me-262s built. 237 destroyed by Allied fighters. 564 lost to all causes. The laughter in that Bavarian briefing room would become history's most expensive miscalculation, measured in 2,600 dead Luftwaffe pilots and the collapse of German air superiority. February 15, 1945. Lechfeld. Oberst Heinrich Baer reviewed the tactical summaries from the previous month. At Chmur on January 22, his pilots had achieved a 47-to-1 kill ratio against American B-17 formations. At Rain on January 28, the ratio had been 35-0. At Brandenburg on February 3, 41 American bombers had fallen to Me-262s armed with R-4M rockets, with German losses limited to 2 aircraft with minor damage, both of which returned to base and flew again the next day. The Messerschmitt Me-262 Schwalbe flew at 540 miles per hour, 120 miles per hour faster than any Allied fighter. It carried 430 Mk-108 cannons, each firing 650 rounds per minute, capable of destroying a B-17 with 3 hits. The latest variant carried 24 R-4M air-to-air rockets, unguided but devastating against bomber formations. Each rocket weighed 3.85 kilograms and could destroy a heavy bomber with a single hit. Recent American failures reinforced German confidence. On February 9, 12 P-51 Mustangs had attempted to intercept 4 Me-262s near Munich. Result: 3 P-51s destroyed, 0 German losses. On February 11, 8 P-47 Thunderbolts engaged 2 Me-262s over Stuttgart. Result: 2 P-47s destroyed, both Me-262s returned to base undamaged. The Americans had lost 847 heavy bombers to all causes in January 1945 alone. Heinrich Baer had personally destroyed 220 Allied aircraft in his combat career. He wore the Knight's Cross with oak leaves and swords. He had survived 4 years of continuous combat on 3 fronts. He had flown 1,000 combat missions. His combat record was impeccable, his tactical judgment proven over years of air warfare. His assessment of American capability was based on mathematical reality, not prejudice. Hauptmann Joseph Priller presented his weekly intelligence analysis to headquarters staff. American fighter production increased 340% between 1943 and 1944. Their current monthly output of P-51 Mustangs alone exceeds 500 aircraft. A single North American aviation facility in California produces more fighters monthly than our entire remaining industrial capacity. He paused, reading from his typed report. Furthermore, American pilots are developing new tactical approaches, specifically targeting our aircraft during vulnerable phases of flight, takeoff, landing, and climb-out. Oberst Baer interrupted. And how many of these mass-produced American fighters have successfully engaged a 262 at combat altitude? How many have caught a jet at 540 miles per hour? Priller consulted his notes. Direct air-to-air engagements at altitude remain statistically insignificant, Herr Oberst. However, the pattern of losses during takeoff and landing operations has increased 47% in the past 3 weeks. Baer dismissed the concern with a wave. Accidents, poor pilot training. We're putting boys with 50 hours of flight time into the cockpit of the most advanced fighter aircraft ever built. Of course, we're losing aircraft on takeoff and landing. Lieutenant Franz Stigler had flown the Me-262 for 6 weeks. Previously a veteran of the Eastern Front with 127 kills flying Bf-109s, he had transitioned to jets in January. His first combat mission in the 262 had occurred on January 25 over Mannheim. He had engaged a formation of 24 B-17s with a single firing pass at 520 miles per hour. Elapsed time from initial sighting to firing position, 140 seconds. Elapsed time in firing range, 2.3 seconds. Result, 3 B-17s destroyed with cannon fire, 1 more damaged and subsequently crashed. Total ammunition expended, 85 rounds from 4 cannons. He had departed the engagement area before American escort fighters could react. The P-51s had been 8,000 feet below and 3 miles behind when he made his attack run. By the time they climbed to intercept altitude, he was 15 miles away and accelerating. On January 29, he had destroyed 2 more B-17s in a similar attack. Elapsed time in firing range, 3.1 seconds. Result, 2 confirmed kills. On February 7, he destroyed a P-47 Thunderbolt that had attempted to pursue him. The P-47 pilot had been competent, but his aircraft's maximum speed of 433 miles per hour made the engagement entirely one-sided. Elapsed time from Stigler's decision to engage to P-47's destruction, 48 seconds. His experience confirmed every aspect of German jet superiority. The mathematics seemed irrefutable. Inglewood, California, November 1944. James H. Kindleberger walked through the North American Aviation Factory as the day shift reached peak production. The Inglewood facility produced 17 P-51 Mustangs daily. Every 8 hours and 20 minutes, another fighter aircraft rolled off the assembly line, fully fueled, armed, and flight-ready. In July 1940, America produced just 331 military aircraft monthly across all manufacturers and all types. By December 1941, production reached 1,854 monthly, still spread across dozens of aircraft types for multiple services. By July 1943, North American Aviation's Inglewood plant alone was producing 394 P-51 Mustangs monthly. By November 1944, this single facility was producing 520 P-51 Mustangs monthly. By February 1945, daily production had increased to 17 aircraft. This single facility was producing more fighter aircraft than Germany's entire remaining aviation industry combined. Germany's total fighter production for February 1945 would reach 1,104 aircraft of all types from all manufacturers. North American Aviation's Inglewood plant alone produced 476 P-51s that month. Dorothy Mee Richardson, previously a seamstress at a Lowe's Angels clothing factory earning $18 weekly, now operated a riveting station on the P-51 fuselage assembly line, producing 340 riveted joints per 8-hour shift. Her station installed the structural connections for the aircraft's center fuselage section. Each P-51 required 408,000 rivets total. Her team of 6 workers installed 2,040 rivets per shift. Dorothy's single-shift production of rivets exceeded the total weekly rivet installation capacity of the entire Messerschmitt Regensburg facility, which employed 4,200 workers, but produced only 8 Me-262s weekly in February 1945. She earned $62 weekly, owned a car, lived in a new apartment building constructed specifically for war workers, and sent money home to her family in Oklahoma. She had never seen a German aircraft. She had never heard a shot fired in anger. She arrived at 6:00 a.m., worked until 2:30 p.m. with a 45-minute lunch break, and went home to an apartment with running water, electricity, and a telephone. Her station's daily rivet output exceeded the entire rivet installation capacity of any single German aircraft factory. She produced more structural connections in 1 8-hour shift than an entire German factory produced in 24 hours. Marcus Washington, from Detroit, Michigan, operated the hydraulic press that formed the P-51's wing skin panels. His press produced 16 wing panels per hour, 128 per 8-hour shift. Each P-51 required 8 wing panels. His single press station produced enough wing panels for 16 complete aircraft daily. His daily output exceeded the total wing panel production of the entire Messerschmitt manufacturing complex at Augsburg. The Augsburg facility, employing 2,890 workers, produced 6 Me-262s weekly in February 1945. Marcus Washington's single press station produced components for 112 P-51s weekly. He earned $74 weekly, had health insurance provided by North American Aviation, and owned a house purchased with a loan from the company credit union. His press consumed 840 kilowatt-hours of electricity daily. The entire Augsburg Messerschmitt facility received 6,200 kilowatt-hours daily due to power rationing and Allied bombing damage to the electrical grid. His single station's daily output of wing panels exceeded the weekly output of Germany's second-largest aircraft factory. Edward R. Martin, $1-a-year man from General Motors, managed production scheduling for the Inglewood facility. Previously vice president of manufacturing at GM's Flint assembly plant, he had volunteered for government service in 1942 at a symbolic salary of $1 annually while maintaining his GM compensation. He managed 41,826 workers across 3 shifts. The facility consumed 2.8 million kilowatt-hours of electricity weekly. It received 18,400 tons of aluminum monthly. It consumed 127,000 gallons of aviation fuel weekly for aircraft testing alone. It employed 412 engineers who did nothing but design improvements to the production process itself, not the aircraft. His facility produced more combat aircraft monthly than the United Kingdom's entire Supermarine, Hawker, and Bristol aircraft companies combined. Americans discarded 340 pounds of aluminum scrap daily at the Inglewood facility. Trimmings, rejected parts, damaged components. Germany allocated 180 pounds of aluminum monthly to each Luftwaffe fighter base for field repairs. The waste from North American Aviation's quality control rejections exceeded Germany's entire field repair allocation. Workers threw away defective hydraulic fittings that Germany rationed by the individual unit, requiring written authorization from base commanders to replace. The cafeteria at Inglewood discarded more food daily than the Luftwaffe base at Lechfeld received in weekly rations. On February 15, 1945, the Inglewood cafeteria served 41,826 workers across 3 shifts. Food waste from a single day, spoiled produce, overproduction, plate scrapings, totaled 2,840 pounds. Lechfeld Air Base, home to 2 full Jagdgeschwader totaling 187 pilots and 1,240 ground personnel, received 1,800 pounds of fresh food weekly. The waste aluminum from a single day's production at Inglewood, rejected parts, manufacturing scrap, quality control failures, totaled 340 pounds. This aluminum could have built 3 complete Me-262 airframes. The facility discarded this amount daily. In 1 week, Inglewood's aluminum waste could have built 21 Me-262s. Germany's total Me-262 production for the week of February 15, 1945 was 19 aircraft. Workers threw away cutting oil, hydraulic fluid, and lubricants that German maintenance crews measured in milliliters and recorded in logbooks requiring officer signatures. A single day's discarded consumables at Inglewood exceeded the monthly allocation for an entire German fighter base. Hauptmann Joseph Priller filed his February 18 intelligence report warning of American production capacity. Enemy fighter production continues to accelerate. North American Aviation's California facility alone now produces 520 P-51 Mustangs monthly. Republic Aviation produces 425 P-47 Thunderbolts monthly. These 2 facilities combined exceed total German fighter production of all types from all manufacturers. Furthermore, the enemy is developing tactical doctrine specifically designed to exploit our aircraft's vulnerability during takeoff and landing. I recommend immediate implementation of defensive fighter screens at all jet bases during launch and recovery operations. The report was filed. No action was taken. February 25, 1945, near Giebelstadt Airfield, Bavaria, 13:47 hours. Lieutenant Franz Stigler was returning from his 8th combat mission when he saw them. For P-51 Mustangs, 6,000 feet above the airfield, circling. He was at 800 feet altitude, speed 310 miles per hour, fuel state critical, landing gear down. At 13:47 hours and 15 seconds, the lead P-51 rolled inverted and dove. At 13:47 hours and 38 seconds, Stigler saw tracer fire pass over his canopy. At 13:47 hours and 41 seconds, he jettisoned his external fuel tanks and advanced throttles to maximum power, gear still down. At 13:47 hours and 44 seconds, 20 cannon shells struck his right engine. At 13:47 hours and 46 seconds, his right engine exploded. At 13:47 hours and 49 seconds, he initiated ejection sequence. At 13:47 hours and 51 seconds, his aircraft impacted a forest 2 miles south of Giebelstadt airfield. Elapsed time from engagement to destruction, 36 seconds. Kill time from first rounds fired to aircraft destruction, 13 seconds. Captain Charles E. Yeager, 363rd Fighter Squadron, 357th Fighter Group, had observed the Me-262 beginning its landing approach at 13:46 hours. Standard operating procedure. Jets were most vulnerable during landing, when speed dropped below 350 miles per hour and maneuverability was constrained by low altitude, extended landing gear, and flaps. At 13:47 hours and 15 seconds, Yeager rolled into a 70-degree dive from 7,000 feet, building speed to 450 miles per hour. At 13:47 hours and 38 seconds, he opened fire at 800 yards range with 6.50 caliber machine guns, 400 rounds per second combined rate of fire. At 13:47 hours and 41 seconds, he observed strikes on the target's right engine. At 13:47 hours and 44 seconds, the right engine exploded. At 13:47 hours and 46 seconds, he observed pilot ejection. At 13:47 hours and 49 seconds, the Me-262 impacted terrain. Total engagement duration, 34 seconds. Ammunition expended, 340 rounds from 6.50 caliber machine guns. Kill confirmed by gun camera footage and ground observers. At 13:49 hours, a second Me-262 approached Giebelstadt from the northeast, altitude 1,200 feet, landing gear down. Lieutenant William J. Cullerton, 362nd Fighter Squadron, engaged from 8,000 feet. At 13:49 hours and 22 seconds, Cullerton opened fire. At 13:49 hours and 28 seconds, the Me-262's left engine began trailing smoke. At 13:49 hours and 31 seconds, the pilot attempted to abort landing and retract gear. At 13:49 hours and 35 seconds, the left engine exploded. At 13:49 hours and 39 seconds, the aircraft crashed short of the runway. Elapsed time from engagement to destruction, 41 seconds. Kill time, 17 seconds. Pilot killed in crash. At 13:51 hours, a third Me-262 approached from the south. Lieutenant Robert W. Foy, 364th Fighter Squadron, engaged. At 13:51 hours and 18 seconds, Foy opened fire from 600 yards. At 13:51 hours and 22 seconds, he observed strikes on fuselage and left wing. At 13:51 hours and 25 seconds, the Me-262's left wing separated from the fuselage. At 13:51 hours and 27 seconds, the aircraft entered an inverted spin. At 13:51 hours and 31 seconds, impact. Elapsed time from engagement to destruction, 35 seconds. Kill time, 13 seconds. Pilot killed. Total engagement duration over Giebelstadt, 4 minutes 16 seconds. Enemy losses, 3 Me-262 jet fighters destroyed, 3 pilots killed. American losses, 0 aircraft, 0 pilots. Kill ratio, 3-0. The ammunition expended in this 4-minute engagement, rounds of .50 caliber, exceeded Giebelstadt Airfield's monthly allocation of 800 rounds for defensive positions. The fuel consumed by the 4 P-51s during this single patrol, 380 gallons, exceeded the weekly allocation for all ground vehicles at Giebelstadt. Oberst Heinrich Baer read the after-action reports that evening. 3 Me-262s destroyed, all during landing approach. All by P-51 Mustangs that had been orbiting above the airfield waiting for jets to land. He called his adjutant. Order all flights to maintain combat air patrol over Giebelstadt during landing operations. Minimum 2 FW-190s or BF-109s. American fighters are no longer respecting airfield neutrality. His adjutant nodded, Jowl Herr Oberst, should I forward this tactical development to Luftwaffe High Command? Baer considered. Send it, but also note our jets remain untouchable at combat altitude. The Americans are scavengers shooting wounded birds, not hunters. February 27, 1945. Luftwaffe High Command, Berlin. Intelligence dismissed the reports from Giebelstadt as tactical errors by inexperienced pilots. The official analysis stated, 3 Me-262s lost to enemy action during final approach to Giebelstadt on February 25 represent isolated incidents resulting from inadequate airfield defense and poor situational awareness by returning pilots. Losses do not indicate systemic vulnerability of Me-262 aircraft to enemy fighters. All 3 pilots had fewer than 70 hours total flight time. Recommend improved training protocols. Oberst Heinrich Baer reviewed this analysis and agreed. American fighters were exploiting carelessness, not defeating superior German technology. The mathematics remained clear. Me-262s at altitude and combat speed remained invulnerable. Hauptmann Joseph Priller reported to headquarters with updated intelligence. American tactical doctrine has evolved significantly in the past 30 days. Enemy fighters now maintain continuous combat air patrol over known Luftwaffe jet bases. They have identified our primary operational airfields: Lechfeld, Giebelstadt, Rhein-Hopsten, Brandenburg, and Ichmur. They position fighters at 8,000 to 10,000 feet altitude in 4-ship formations, rotating stations to maintain continuous coverage. They engage our aircraft during the most vulnerable phases of flight, immediately after takeoff and during final approach to landing. Our losses to this tactic increased from 3 aircraft in January to 11 aircraft in the first 3 weeks of February. He paused and consulted his statistical summary. Furthermore, American production continues to accelerate while ours declines. In February 1945, American production of P-51 Mustangs alone totaled 476 aircraft. German production of all fighter types totaled 1,104 aircraft. A single American factory producing a single type of fighter aircraft manufactured 43% as many aircraft as our entire remaining industrial base producing all types. American production for February 1945. P-51 Mustang production at North American Aviation Inglewood facility alone was 476 aircraft. Total P-51 production from all North American aviation facilities was 820 aircraft. Total American fighter production all types was 3,140 aircraft. German production for February 1945. Me-262 production was 231 aircraft. Total fighter production all types was 1,104 aircraft. A single American facility, North American Aviation's Inglewood plant, exceeded Germany's entire Me-262 production by 106%. Total American fighter production exceeded total German fighter production by 184%. These numbers represented a production gap that could not be closed through tactical innovation or pilot skill. American production for February 1945. Total bomber production was 1,840 aircraft. Total transport aircraft production was 928 aircraft. Total military aircraft production all types was 6,890 aircraft. Germany's total military aircraft production for February 1945, all types was 2,104 aircraft. American production exceeded German production by 227%. This gap had existed since mid-1943 and was widening. A single category of American aircraft, heavy bombers, exceeded Germany's total aircraft production all types. American B-24 Liberator production alone in February 1945 was 1,240 aircraft, exceeding Germany's total aircraft production by 20 aircraft. The Luftwaffe tried dispersing Me-262 operations to secondary airfields. The Americans identified the new locations within 72 hours and repositioned their patrols. They attempted launching jets from multiple airfields simultaneously to dilute American coverage. The Americans added more patrol aircraft. They tried dawn and dusk operations when visibility favored defenders. The Americans equipped their fighters with improved radios and ground radar direction. They attempted using Bf-109s and FW-190s as close escort for landing jets. The Americans engaged the escorts first, shooting down the piston engine fighters before they could provide meaningful protection. March 2, 1945, Lechfeld Air Base, 8:47 hours. 4 Me-262s launched on a morning intercept mission against American bomber formations reported over Munich. At 8:47 hours, all 4 jets became airborne. At 8:48 hours and 30 seconds, 8 P-51 Mustangs dove from 9,000 feet altitude, attacking the jets during their climb-out when speed was still below 400 miles per hour. At 8:48 hours and 55 seconds, Lieutenant James M. Brooks opened fire on the trailing Me-262. At 8:49 hours and 2 seconds, the Me-262's right engine exploded. At 8:49 hours and 5 seconds, the aircraft crashed 3 miles northeast of Lechfeld. Elapsed time from engagement to destruction, 35 seconds. Kill time, 10 seconds. Pilot killed. At 8:49 hours and 15 seconds, Captain Leonard K. Carson engaged the second Me-262. At 8:49 hours and 23 seconds, Carson's fire struck the cockpit. At 8:49 hours and 25 seconds, the Me-262 entered an uncontrolled dive. At 8:49 hours and 31 seconds, impact. Elapsed time from engagement to destruction, 40 seconds. Kill time, 16 seconds. Pilot killed. At 8:49 hours and 44 seconds, Lieutenant Robert C. Curtis engaged the third Me-262. At 8:49 hours and 51 seconds, Curtis observed strikes on the left wing and fuselage. At 8:49 hours and 54 seconds, the Me-262's left engine failed. At 8:49 hours and 58 seconds, the pilot ejected. At 8:50 hours and 3 seconds, the aircraft impacted a forest. Elapsed time from engagement to destruction, 48 seconds. Kill time, 19 seconds. Pilot survived with injuries. The fourth Me-262 escaped by advancing throttles to maximum power and extending its climb, reaching 15,000 feet and 520 miles per hour before the pursuing P-51s could close range. Total engagement duration, 3 minutes 16 seconds. Enemy losses, 3 Me-262 jet fighters destroyed, 2 pilots killed, 1 pilot injured. American losses, 0. Kill ratio, 3-0. The ammunition expended in this 3-minute engagement, 140 rounds of .50 caliber, exceeded Lechfeld Air Base's monthly allocation of 960 rounds for all defensive positions. The fuel consumed by the 8 P-51s during this single patrol, 620 gallons, exceeded the weekly fuel allocation for all ground vehicles and electrical generators at Lechfeld combined. Hauptmann Joseph Priller reviewed combat loss reports and prepared his weekly intelligence summary. March 2, 1945, 3 Me-262s destroyed by P-51 Mustangs at Lechfeld during takeoff phase. February 25, 1945, 3 Me-262s destroyed by P-51 Mustangs at Giebelstadt during landing phase. February 28, 1945, 2 Me-262s destroyed by P-51 Mustangs at Rheinhopsten during landing phase. February 27, 1945, 1 Me-262 destroyed by P-51 Mustangs at Brandenburg during landing phase. Total losses in 6 days. 9 Me-262 jet fighters to American escort fighters exploiting takeoff and landing vulnerability. All engagements followed identical pattern. American fighters positioned above German jet bases, diving attacks during vulnerable flight phases. Kills accomplished in 10 to 50 seconds of engagement time. His conclusion was mathematical. The tactical situation has fundamentally changed. American fighters cannot engage our jets at combat altitude and speed. However, they have developed effective doctrine for engaging our jets during takeoff and landing when performance advantages are negated. Current loss rate of 1.5 aircraft per day to this tactic alone is unsustainable. We are losing jets faster than production can replace them. Recognition came slowly at headquarters. Oberst Baer received Priller's report on March 3. He studied the loss statistics. 9 aircraft in 6 days, 54 pilots killed or injured in 2 weeks. Production was 231 aircraft per month, approximately 7 aircraft per day for the entire Luftwaffe. Losses to all causes were averaging 12 aircraft per day. The mathematics were becoming uncomfortable. But Oberst Baer still refused to accept the fundamental conclusion. He annotated Priller's report. Losses reflect insufficient training and poor airfield defense. Jets remain superior to all Allied fighters. Recommend 1. Extended pilot training from current 50 hours to minimum 120 hours before jet assignment. 2. Permanent fighter coverage over all jet bases during operations. 3. Improved ground-based anti-aircraft defense. These measures will reduce losses to acceptable levels. He did not recommend operational changes. He did not recommend acknowledging American tactical superiority. He still believed the problem was execution, not mathematics. Lieutenant Franz Stigler, recovered from his ejection injuries, observed the escalating losses from the hospital. He had survived his Me-262 being shot down on February 25. He watched as 3 more pilots from his squadron died in similar attacks. At Lechfeld on March 2, he knew all 3 pilots who were killed. They had been competent, experienced aviators. 2 had over 200 hours in jets. They had followed proper procedures. They had simply been overwhelmed by American fighters with altitude advantage attacking during the vulnerable climb-out phase when jet performance was compromised. The tactical mathematics were clear to him. The Me-262's 540-mile-per-hour speed advantage only existed above 15,000 feet. Below that altitude, during takeoff and landing, the jet was slower, less maneuverable, and completely vulnerable to American fighters who had learned to exploit this weakness systematically. Inglewood, California, March 1945. At the North American Aviation Factory, production reached peak efficiency. The facility operated 24 hours daily across 3 shifts. Every assembly station functioned at maximum output. Every worker understood their role in a vast industrial machine that had been refined over 4 years of continuous operation. The Inglewood facility consumed 2.8 million kilowatt-hours weekly to power its assembly lines, machine tools, lighting, ventilation, and support facilities. Germany's entire remaining aircraft industry consumed 8.4 million kilowatt-hours weekly across all factories combined. 1/3 of Germany's total industrial electrical capacity was being matched by a single American factory. The waste from operations was staggering by any measure except American abundance. Americans discarded 340 pounds of aluminum scrap daily, trimmings from sheet metal cutting, rejected components that failed quality inspection, damaged parts from assembly errors. Germany allocated 180 pounds of aluminum monthly to each Luftwaffe base for field repairs of all aircraft. What Inglewood threw away daily would keep 2 German fighter bases operational for a month. The gap was not merely quantitative but philosophical. Americans could afford waste. Germans were counting grams. Workers threw away defective hydraulic cylinders, rejected electrical components, and damaged instruments that German maintenance crews would have spent 40 hours rebuilding. In the testing section, engineers fired 12,000 rounds daily through machine guns undergoing acceptance testing. Germany's entire monthly allocation of .50 caliber ammunition for the Luftwaffe's captured American weapons was 8,400 rounds. Inglewood's daily testing expenditure exceeded Germany's monthly combat allocation. The numbers weren't aberrations, but reflections of industrial systems operating on different scales of resource availability. Cafeteria operations at Inglewood served 41,826 workers daily across 3 shifts. The menu for March 3, 1945 included roast beef, baked ham, fried chicken, 4 types of fresh vegetables, 3 types of potatoes, fresh bread, butter, milk, coffee, and dessert. Food waste from that single day totaled 2,840 pounds, overproduction, spoilage, plate scrapings. Lechfeld Air Base received 1,800 pounds of food weekly for 1,427 personnel. Inglewood's waste from one day exceeded Lechfeld's entire week allocation. Workers ate fresh fruit shipped from California's Central Valley. German pilots received dehydrated vegetables and ersatz coffee made from roasted grain. The caloric intake of a single Inglewood factory worker exceeded that of a German fighter pilot by 340 calories daily. Aluminum scrap from a single day's production at Inglewood totaled 340 pounds. This could have built 3 Me-262 airframes. Weekly scrap totaled 2,380 pounds, enough aluminum for 21 complete airframes. Germany's Me-262 production for the first week of March 1945 was 19 aircraft. Inglewood's waste aluminum exceeded Germany's total jet fighter production. The facility discarded more in scrap than Germany could build. Discarded cutting fluid, hydraulic oil, and lubricants from a single day's operations at Inglewood totaled 240 gallons. Germany allocated 18 gallons monthly to each fighter base for all maintenance operations. Inglewood's daily waste oil exceeded the monthly allocation for 13 German fighter bases. Quality control rejected 140 propeller blades in the first week of March due to minor imperfections that would have been acceptable in any other air force. Germany's entire propeller production for March was 2,100 blades. Inglewood rejected and scrapped 560 propeller blades that month, 27% of total German production, for quality defects. Hauptmann Joseph Priller's March 10 intelligence report included detailed American production analysis. North American Aviation's Inglewood facility produces 17 P-51 Mustangs daily, 520 monthly. This single factory's monthly output represents 47% of total German fighter production, all types from all factories. Furthermore, the Americans operate 3 P-51 production facilities: Inglewood, Dallas, and Kansas City. Combined P-51 production exceeds 1,200 aircraft monthly. This is 109% of total German aircraft production of all military types from all manufacturers. The productive capacity gap cannot be closed through efficiency improvements or tactical innovation. We are not competing against an industrial rival. We are attempting to match an industrial system operating at a scale we cannot comprehend, much less replicate. March 18, 1945, near Rheinhopsten Airfield, North Rhine-Westphalia. 12 Me-262s from Jagdschwader 7 engaged 16 P-51 Mustangs from the 357th Fighter Group. The engagement lasted 4 minutes and 38 seconds. At 14:23 hours, the Me-262 formation approached Rheinhopsten for landing. At 14:23 hours and 30 seconds, the P-51s attacked from 10,000 feet altitude, diving on the German formation. At 14:23 hours and 55 seconds, Lieutenant William A. Roach engaged the trailing Me-262. At 14:24 hours and 9 seconds, the Me-262's right engine exploded. Kill time, 14 seconds. At 14:24 hours and 12 seconds, the aircraft crashed. Pilot killed. At 14:24 hours and 18 seconds, Captain Charles E. Weaver engaged a second Me-262. At 14:24 hours and 31 seconds, strikes observed on left wing and fuselage. At 14:24 hours and 34 seconds, left wing separated. Kill time, 16 seconds. At 14:24 hours and 37 seconds, impact. Pilot killed. At 14:24 hours and 44 seconds, Lieutenant James H. Howard engaged a third Me-262. At 14:24 hours and 56 seconds, cockpit area destroyed by gunfire. At 14:24 hours and 58 seconds, aircraft entered inverted spin. Kill time, 12 seconds. At 14:25 hours and 4 seconds, impact. Pilot killed. At 14:25 hours and 15 seconds, Major Robert E. Thacker engaged a fourth Me-262. At 14:25 hours and 27 seconds, both engines streaming fire. At 14:25 hours and 30 seconds, pilot ejected. Kill time, 15 seconds. At 14:25 hours and 36 seconds, aircraft impacted forest. Pilot survived. At 14:25 hours and 42 seconds, Captain Donald S. Bryan engaged a fifth Me-262. At 14:25 hours and 53 seconds, right engine explosion. At 14:25 hours and 55 seconds, aircraft lost control. Kill time, 11 seconds. At 14:26 hours and 1 seconds, impact short of runway. Pilot killed. At 14:26 hours and 8 seconds, Lieutenant Raymond H. Litt engaged a sixth Me-262. At 14:26 hours and 19 seconds, fuselage fire. At 14:26 hours and 22 seconds, pilot ejected. Kill time, 14 seconds. At 14:26 hours and 28 seconds, aircraft crashed. Pilot survived with injuries. At 14:26 hours and 34 seconds, Lieutenant Thomas L. Hayes engaged a seventh Me-262. At 14:26 hours and 44 seconds, left engine destroyed. At 14:26 hours and 47 seconds, aircraft attempting emergency landing. Kill time, 13 seconds. At 14:26 hours and 53 seconds, crashed on approach. Pilot killed. At 14:27 hours and 1 seconds, Captain Harold E. Fisher engaged an eighth Me-262. At 14:27 hours and 11 seconds, multiple strikes on wings and fuselage. At 14:27 hours and 14 seconds, aircraft breaking apart in flight. Kill time, 13 seconds. At 14:27 hours and 20 seconds, debris impact. pilot killed. The remaining 4 Mi-262s escaped by executing emergency maximum power climbs, sacrificing remaining fuel to reach altitude and speed where P-51s could not follow. Enemy aircraft destroyed, 8 Mi-262 jet fighters. American losses, 0 aircraft, 0 pilots. Kill ratio, 8-0. Total engagement duration, 4 minutes 38 seconds. Average kill time, 13.5 seconds per aircraft destroyed. The ammunition expended in this engagement, 240 rounds of .50 caliber from 16 P-51s, exceeded Rain-Hopston Airfield's monthly allocation of 1,800 rounds for defensive positions. The fuel consumed by the 16 P-51s during this patrol, 280 gallons, exceeded the weekly fuel allocation for all ground vehicles at Rain-Hopston. The rubber consumed by tire wear on the 16 P-51s during this single mission takeoff and landing, approximately 4 pounds, exceeded the monthly allocation for all ground vehicle tires at Rain-Hopston. At 14:27 hours and 35 seconds, Oberst Heinrich Baer was flying the 9th Mi-262 in the formation. He witnessed the destruction of 8 aircraft in 4 minutes and 38 seconds. He attempted to engage the attacking P-51s, but his aircraft was in landing configuration, speed 340 miles per hour, altitude 2,200 feet. The P-51s were at 450 miles per hour in diving attacks. At 14:27 hours and 50 seconds, 2 P-51s positioned on his tail. At 14:27 hours and 58 seconds, he saw tracer fire. At 14:28 hours and 3 seconds, rounds struck his left wing. At 14:28 hours and 7 seconds, his left engine exploded. At 14:28 hours and 11 seconds, he initiated ejection. At 14:28 hours and 13 seconds, he cleared the aircraft. At 14:28 hours and 29 seconds, his parachute deployed. At 14:28 hours and 41 seconds, his Mi-262 impacted the ground 2 miles south of Rain-Hopston. Elapsed time from engagement to death of the most experienced jet pilot in the Luftwaffe, 51 seconds. Kill time from first enemy rounds to aircraft destruction, 18 seconds. Oberst Heinrich Baer, holder of the Knight's Cross with oak leaves and swords, 220 confirmed kills, 1,000 combat missions, 4 years of continuous combat on 3 fronts. The man who had laughed at American capability on February 14, died in the crash of his parachute when high-voltage power lines severed his suspension lines at 400 feet altitude. The mocker had been proven catastrophically wrong. His miscalculation cost him his life and helped cost Germany its air force. One German pilot pulled from the wreckage told his American interrogators, "This wasn't combat, this was systematic annihilation. You didn't defeat us in fair battle. You positioned your aircraft above our airfields and shot us when we were most vulnerable. But the real defeat wasn't tactical, it was industrial. You could afford to position fighters above every one of our jet bases simultaneously because you had so many aircraft that dedicating 30 fighters to patrol duty represented no operational sacrifice. We couldn't afford anything. Every aircraft, every pilot, every gallon of fuel was allocated and rationed. You had such abundance that you could waste resources on patrol duty. We were counting bullets." April 1945, POW Interrogation Center, Luxembourg. Hauptmann Joseph Priller sat across from American intelligence officers, providing testimony about German jet operations. "We were not defeated by better soldiers, but by better factories. Your single North American Aviation Inglewood facility produced 520 P-51 Mustangs monthly. Our entire remaining aircraft industry produced 1,104 fighters of all types monthly. A single American factory, producing a single type of aircraft, manufactured 47% of what our entire nation could produce. You built industrial capacity that we couldn't match even if every German citizen worked in aircraft factories. The production gap translated directly into tactical capability. You could afford to position 4-ship fighter patrols above every one of our jet airfields simultaneously and maintain those patrols continuously. We counted 12 P-51s at Lechfeld, 8 at Giebelstadt, 16 at Rain-Hopston, 12 at Brandenburg, and 8 at Achmur. 56 fighters dedicated to patrol duty alone. That represented 11% of your monthly P-51 production from a single factory. For us, 56 fighters represented 5% of our total monthly fighter production. You could dedicate 11% of one factory's output to a single tactical mission. We couldn't spare 5% of our entire national production for the same purpose. The mathematics were impossible. Lieutenant France Stigler provided additional testimony to American interrogators. I flew the Me-262 for 47 days before being shot down. I witnessed the systematic destruction of German jet capability by American tactical innovation and industrial abundance. The Americans developed specific doctrine to exploit our vulnerability during takeoff and landing. They positioned fighters at altitude above our bases. They waited for us to commit to landing approaches when our speed dropped and maneuverability decreased. They dove from altitude, achieving speed superiority through potential energy conversion. They destroyed our aircraft in 10 to 50 seconds of engagement. The tactical innovation was effective, but the real defeat was industrial. They could afford to develop, test, refine, and implement new tactical doctrine because they had unlimited resources for experimentation. They could lose aircraft testing new approaches and simply build more. We couldn't afford experimentation. Every aircraft was precious. Every mission was planned to minimize risk. They revolutionized tactical aviation through trial and error backed by inexhaustible production. Additional testimonies from captured Luftwaffe personnel documented the scale of German miscalculation. Major Walther Dahl: "We brought the finest cavalry horses to a tank battle. Our aircraft were technologically superior on paper. Their aircraft were numerically overwhelming in practice. Technology without production capacity is theoretical superiority. They proved that industrial abundance defeats technical elegance." Oberleutnant Heinrich Ehler: "Their excess capacity exceeded our maximum effort. They produced more fighter aircraft than they needed and used the surplus for experimental tactics, training, patrol duty, and replacement reserves. We produced fewer aircraft than we needed and used every single one for frontline combat. They could afford waste. They could afford mistakes. They could afford learning. We couldn't afford anything. Every resource was allocated to immediate survival. That allocation strategy guaranteed eventual defeat." Hauptmann Werner Molders: "The mathematics were brutal and undeniable. In February 1945, you produced 3,140 fighter aircraft. We produced 1,104. You produced 284% more fighters than we did. But the real gap was even larger. You operated training programs that consumed 1,200 aircraft monthly, more than our entire production. You could afford to crash 400 aircraft monthly in training accidents and still maintain numerical superiority. We couldn't afford to crash 20 aircraft monthly. Your training accident losses exceeded our total production. That wasn't a production gap. That was a different industrial civilization." Major Gunter Rahl: "They could lose 8 P-51s to mechanical failure, weather, accidents, and operational causes for everyone destroyed in combat and still maintain numerical superiority. Their replacement rate exceeded our total production. At Rheinhopsten on March 18, they destroyed 8 Me-262s in 4 minutes and 38 seconds with 0 losses. But even if we had destroyed 8 P-51s in return, they would have replaced those losses within 11 hours of production time at a single factory. We couldn't replace 8 Me-262s in a week from our entire national production. They could trade 8 fighters for 8 fighters and win through production. We couldn't trade anything. Every loss was permanent." Production statistics stated by Hauptmann Priller during formal interrogation. American fighter aircraft production February 1945, 3,140 aircraft all types. German fighter aircraft production February 1945, 1,104 aircraft all types. American production exceeded German production by 2,036 aircraft, representing 184% superiority. North American Aviation Inglewood Facility production February 1945, 476 P-51 Mustangs. This represented 43% of total German fighter production from a single American factory producing a single type. Total American P-51 production from all North American aviation facilities, 820 aircraft. This exceeded German Me-262 production by 255% and exceeded total German fighter production by 74%. A single American aircraft type from a single manufacturer exceeded our entire national fighter production. Entire American military aircraft production, all types February 1945, 6,890 aircraft. German military aircraft production, all types, February 1945. 2,104 aircraft. American production exceeded German production by 227%. These numbers represent industrial capacity differences of such magnitude that tactical or technical superiority became irrelevant. You defeated us with factory workers and machine tools, not pilots and guns. Final philosophical assessment. The Me-262 proved that democratic industrial systems operating at full capacity generate material abundance that totalitarian systems cannot match through ideological fervor or technical innovation. Free workers motivated by wages, housing, and future prosperity outproduced slave labor driven by ideology and fear. Dorothy Me Richardson's riveting station, operated voluntarily for $62 weekly, produced more structural components than an entire German factory employing thousands under coercion. Democratic cooperation between government, industry, and labor exceeded totalitarian command economics. Industrial abundance buried ideological superiority under millions of tons of aluminum, steel, and explosive power. The mathematical progression was inexorable. In 1940, Germany produced more military aircraft than America. By 1942, American production had achieved parity. By 1944, American production exceeded German production by 200%. By early 1945, American production exceeded German production by 227%. This trajectory was determined not by combat outcomes, but by industrial system design. Democracies that respected worker rights, paid competitive wages, operated efficient capital markets, and coordinated voluntarily among thousands of independent entities generated productive capacity that authoritarian systems could not replicate. The lesson was not merely that America outproduced Germany, but that free economic systems outproduce controlled economies by generating innovation, efficiency, and worker productivity that coercion cannot match. Technical specifications of the Me-262, 540 miles per hour, 4 30mm cannons, innovative swept-wing design, became historically irrelevant against American production of 6,890 military aircraft monthly. Technical excellence without industrial scale is a curiosity. Industrial scale without technical excellence is temporary. Industrial scale combined with technical adequacy defeats technical excellence without industrial scale. The P-51 Mustang was not the finest fighter aircraft of World War II by any single technical measure. It was the most effective fighter aircraft because it combined adequate technical performance with mass production, reliable logistics, and tactical doctrine, refined through continuous operational experience backed by unlimited replacement capacity. February 14, 1945, Oberst Heinrich Baer had laughed at American fighter capability and dismissed warnings about American production. April 10, 1945, Baer was dead, shot down during landing approach by a P-51 Mustang that had been waiting above his airfield. His mockery became history's most expensive miscalculation, measured in 237 Me-262s destroyed by Allied fighters, 564 Me-262s lost to all causes, 2,600 Luftwaffe pilots killed, and the complete collapse of German air superiority over the Reich in the final months of the war. The lesson remains unchanged and unambiguous, dismissing democratic nations as weak because they prefer peace, or underestimating free people's productive capacity when motivated by existential threat, invites catastrophic miscalculation. Industrial democracies at war combine material abundance, technical adaptability, and coordinated national effort in ways that authoritarian systems cannot match. The mathematics of democratic production defeated the ideology of totalitarian superiority. That lesson has been proven repeatedly throughout history and remains valid today. Those who forget it condemn themselves to relearn it at catastrophic cost.